Kuzangbola, dear panelists, moderator, participants, and viewers. I would like to begin with His Majesty's quote. With changing times, we will confront new challenges, but if we pledge to work together in an intelligent, resourceful manner, we will overcome every difficulty. Unquote. I would like to welcome all our esteemed guests to the seventh and the last panel of this series of EduTalk Bhutan, Together Forward. Today, we will be discussing social and emotional learning. It is also a beautiful coincidence today to end the first series of EduTalk with V-TOB turning 10 months old. We started back in March 7th, 2020 as a voluntary group by teachers across Bhutan with an aim of transforming challenges into endless opportunities and provide our services beyond the self. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for the love and support as well as the trust that was bestowed upon us. Let us be more and do more together is our constant wish to fulfill. So EduTalk started from drawing inspiration from the royal address at the National Day celebrations in 2020. Through EduTalk, VTOP seeks to discuss the future of education through a series of conversations on Zoom. A unique feature of these conversations is that the panelists will consist of individuals from all walks of life. This initial set of conversations will provide the platform for voices from outside the current education system in Bhutan to share their experiences, perspectives, and insights. We will be looking forward to similar sessions with different panelists too. I would also like to make a humble submission here, saying that we acknowledge the wonderful journey of modern education in Bhutan, and we have achieved so much in so less a time thus far. I would like to take this honor of offering our gratitude to all our education families and their contribution to education in Bhutan. We have come a long way. The whole conversation of EduTalk is divided into 7 themes, with each theme taking up one session from January 1st to 7th. And today is our last of the first series. During the conversations, panelists will share their expertise or experience in the Buddhist education system, their current views and beliefs, and offer recommendations to address key issues. It is expected that the final report with a set of recommendations will be compiled and submitted to the Minister of Education and other relevant offices with a view to co-create an education system that is resilient, responsive, and flexible while serving the current needs in nation building. All the sessions happen on Zoom and they are recorded to be shared on official VTOP social media. Before I welcome our panelists today, I would like to put forward a disclaimer. EduTalk is a humble and voluntary initiative to look at education as a collective responsibility among citizens so that we can come together to co-create, collaborate, consult, and inspire each other. Thoughts and opinions expressed in the conversations are solely of the panelists and moderators and not necessarily of their employer, organization, committee, or other groups. Once again, to reiterate, the main aim of these conversations is to get everyone to engage in something as important and critical as education, so that we might take collective responsibility and contribute in our own small ways. With this, I would like to welcome our panelists and moderator for today and the last session of EduTalk Volume 1. I would like to welcome Ms. Kitso Tenzin Dermawangchuk, who is a sophomore at Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan, as our moderator for today. On our panelist list, we have Dr. Adrian Chan, who is joining us all the way from Singapore. He is His Majesty's leadership resource person for His Majesty's Secretariat, as well as the founding leadership faculty at RIX in Finselingla. Next up, we have Dr. Tencho Duji, who is joining us for the second time. He is the team leader for National Health and Psychological Response Team. He is also a senior consultant psychiatrist and a professor of psychiatry. Welcome, Dr. Tencho. Next up, we have Dr. Doji Wanchula. Dr. Doji has been a moderator as well as a resource person as well as an advisor for this team. Dr. Doji is a researcher and a teaching associate with the University of Macau before the endless list of experience in Bhutan as an educator, as a technical person at BBS, and a lot more. I would like to take the honor of welcoming Mr. Kezang, uh, who is the CEO of Better Park, a new beautiful venture that is taking shape in Bhutan. So I would like to welcome Sir Kezang. We have Miss Natalia Mofel, who has been in Bhutan for a long time and who is working with UNICEF as an education specialist. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining. We have Miss Tring Yudin, who is reaching us from the Middle East and joining us real time here. She is the outreach director for the Contentment Foundation. We have Miss Yangdela. She is 2525. She decides youth leader and USAIDS Lead Alliance Program Fellow for 2020. So with this, I would like to announce a house rule for the panelists. In any part of the conversation, do let us know if you don't wish to be quoted or recorded. We are not going live, but the video is recorded. Lastly, as the organizer and on behalf of the team, I wish everyone a fruitful conversation and thank you for coming on board once again. Good luck and touch delay. Over to you, Kitso.
Yes, thank you, Sir Sonam Norbu. Before I begin, I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations to the V-TOB family for all that you've achieved. And also thank you for introducing all of us, esteemed panelists, organizers, and participants. Guzosang Polo. Thank you for joining us for EduTALK 7. Our theme for today is social and emotional learning, and this session aims to touch upon the topics of mental health and well-being, character building and resilience, and life skill education. I personally feel that there isn't a more appropriate time for us to be having this discussion, given that the number of mental health related cases is on the rise every year in Bhutan. This pandemic has brought about new challenges, and there is no doubt that this has further worsened our situation. Even before the pandemic, schools globally have started adopting concepts such as mindfulness as a part of their curriculum. Over the last few days, we have heard most panelists highlight the need for introducing social and emotional learning in our schools. On that note, I would like to call upon our first speaker, Dr. Adrian Chan, to share his opening statement with us. Thank you.
Kusambola, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll jumpstart by sharing about the context of this talk, which is, in my view, poverty. And not just poverty in the material sense, but poverty in all four realms of spiritual, motivational, relational, and pedagogical, infrastructural, and technological. I call them the PIT. So with regard to poverty, right, poverty in the educator and poverty in the learner will contribute to educational poverty. And when we have poverty, the way students learn and the way teachers teach are going to be hugely impacted. And I think this is where my fellow panelists can jump off. But let me just go quickly into the various aspects of the four realms of poverty. I think pedagogical poverty has been talked about quite a lot over the course of the 7 days. I just want to say that we are poor when great teachers, when we don't know that great teachers can teach without teaching. And we are poor when we don't know that great learners learn even without the teachers being present. And we are poor pedagogically when we don't realize that at the heart of being a teacher, what it means is to be a disciple maker, to be a replicator, to replicate the love of learning. Secondly, in terms of infrastructural poverty, I think we are impoverished when we overinvest in infrastructures because teaching does not have to be expensive. And sometimes, and in fact, I'll say many times, some of the most important learnings occur in spite of schools. And thirdly, in terms of technological poverty, I think we're impoverished when we overemphasize the sexiness of technology as if it's the silver bullet. Technology is neutral. Technology can be helpful. We need to be tech savvy, but we must be learner centric. So we are impoverished when we go off kilter on this. The bottom line is that PIT, pedagogical, infrastructural, and technological, it is the pit, because it's the lowest form of investment to any kind of educational reform. Yet, unfortunately, a lot of our energy and resources have gone into thinking about the pit of educational reform. I believe that if we invest in the other three areas of spiritual, motivational, and relational, we can do much more with what we have. So with this, let me just go on very quickly to the spiritual. By spiritual poverty, we are impoverished when we don't realize that education must invoke spiritual elevation. Education must be in the business of nurturing spiritual giants. And education must invoke and involve our spiritual giants too. And if we do not have wisdom as the ultimate aim of education, then we are truly, truly impoverished. In this slide, you will see some of the buffers that can guard us against spiritual poverty. At the top, you see reflection. And reflection is a pet topic of mine. You can go to my blog if you want to and have a look at what I write about reflection. But essentially, it is two areas. One is problem-focused thinking, and the other one is connective thinking. And I think reflection is such an important thing that if you are not reflecting daily, you are not equipped for any kind of teaching or leading role. For myself, I put on the habit of daily recording down key lessons that I've learned and daily trying to think through how can I do things better. And I think this is a discipline to have. The second buffer is mindfulness. And in mindfulness, I do try to contrast between what the Buddhist rich traditions have to offer versus what the New Age positive psychology traditions have to offer. I find it interesting that the positive psychologists movement are coming into Bhutan to teach to what is predominantly a Buddhist nation on how to be mindful. I marvel at that. I guess you are so open to do that, but I just want to mindfully remind you that you have a rich tradition that you can draw from. My tradition, on the other hand, comes from contemplation, which is a different way of reflecting. And the contemplation comes from the Christian Catholic traditions of the Desert Fathers, where instead of emptying oneself and being present in the moment, the contemplation focuses on the topic or the passage at hand. It talks about being able to take different perspectives and being empathetic. So regardless of whichever traditions you come from, it is this mental practice that allow us to elevate ourselves to a higher form of spirituality. And spiritual poverty, if we are in danger of that, leads to poor educator credibility. What do I mean? Educator credibility has got to do with calling, with character and competence. Now, if you don't have calling, if you don't have character, to me, competence is useless. Yet a lot of the conversation that we have focus on developing the competence of the educator. On the other hand, calling and character is a function of how you contemplate, how you're being mindful, how you're being reflective. So it's just something to bear in mind. And yet this is something we may not have paid enough attention on. Let me move on to relational poverty. It's a bit of a detail here. I just want to say three things. Learning occurs always in the context of relationship. I think you've come across the experience where you love the subject because you love the teacher, or you love learning because the teacher has demonstrated love and affection and attention to you. Secondly, learning occurs when we know the learner best. The educator must have a range of repertoire. Whether this person learns by trying or whether this person learns by reflecting or whether this person learns by conversing, and being able to skillfully switch between all these repertoires. There is no average leadership or teaching style in the educator, but it's always customized to the situation and learner. And thirdly, learning is relational. We are all about standing on the shoulders of giants, to be collaborative like what we're doing now, to be multiplicative, where 1 + 1 × 1 is actually mathematically more than one, and to have knowledge and insight becoming emergent. We learn best when we learn together. We realize that the role of the teacher and the student is interchangeable. So when we realize all the relational nature of learning, the challenge before us is to impart these philosophies and to role model these pathways so that we can replicate the relational learner in our students. Measures of relational poverty. Number one, we always say it takes a village to teach a child, but we don't measure the richness of the village. Number two, the alumni must always be involved. Every school that have a poor alumni, I would say you would have relational poverty. When the alumni is involved, then you're relationally rich. The third thing, bottom line, is the so-called teacher versus student ratio. I think the typical challenge or measure is how do we keep reducing this number into one teacher to 20 to 10 to 15, or in Royal Academy's case is 1:5. Now I would challenge you, how about a ratio, an inverse ratio, where it is 5 teachers to 1 student? Can it be done? It must be done, and I say that it can be done because in real life, that is what a teacher, that is what a good student experiences. So that is a challenge I'd like to put forth for yourself, for all of us here. Next is love, L-O-V-E, bring the love back in. The heart of it, if we're not loving, we're not leading, we're not teaching. So I've got an acronym for LOVE here. You can refer to the slides. I won't talk more about it, except that oftentimes, whether it's in the learner or in the teacher, it is the heart that matters. The issue is always the heart of the person. And when we nurture the heart to have that love, it's always more powerful. I want to quickly move on to motivational poverty. I think these areas, motivational poverty is being contributed by poor grit, fixed mindset, learning setbacks, poor learning skills. These are things I think over the 7 days we have talked about. I won't touch too much on that because our panelists will be talking more about these too. The other thing I want to touch on is motivational poverty in educators. On the left-hand side, you see fixed mindsets. On the right-hand side, you see growth mindsets. The question we need to ask ourselves as educators is, where do we find ourselves in most of the time? Are we in a fixed mindset mode or are we growth mindset mode? If we're in fixed mindset mode, guess what? We are role modeling and replicating fixed mindsets in our students. How else then can they be great learners? So our challenge for ourselves is to always go into growth mindset, which are all the things you see on the right. So that's something for us to ponder as well. So in a nutshell, like I said, we focus too much on the stuff in green, when really we should be paying a lot more attention to the other 3, the S, the M, and the R. The bottom line challenge is this: how can we inspire the poorest educators and the poorest learners to become great? And by poorest, I don't mean means. I mean spiritually poor, relationally poor, motivationally poor. So I've got 3 suggestions. The first suggestion is to devise a learning sandbox. We really need to learn what is the best way to journey with the student, what is the best way to journey with the teacher. I'm not quite convinced the old way of doing school is the best way going forward for being school. I'm also not convinced that we understand what is the new definition of school. And I'm also not convinced that the way we've been schooled in the past is the same way we need to school other people going forward. So the idea is a sandbox, and the best way to discover is to discover together. The second suggestion is this. Perhaps we haven't talked too much about school, what does school and the challenges feel or look like in the rural areas. But I think we should go and discover. We should deploy the rural mobile unit to the most far-flung places to bring school to the learner and to the teacher. Bring the school leadership clinic to the school leadership team, because where the most far-flung schools are typically lies the most extreme challenges of management, of a rhythm, of rest, of managing the community and everything that I'm sure you're more familiar than I am. So bring the clinic to the far-flung areas. And thirdly, bring the connection and support to the parents in the area, because that's where the parents are most neglected. And if the parents are not following up or not leading or partners in the teaching of their kids, then we are relationally poor. So finally, I just want to say that the challenge is always to work with the poorest. There's no point working with well-resourced schools. These schools know how to take care of themselves. Instead, I challenge all of us to work with the most hopeless, the most helpless, because when we work with these groups of people, we are challenged to innovate, to inspire new ideas, to instill new ways of teaching, and to introduce in the hearts of these people a new generation of game changers. Whether we will progress with the poorest, with the hopeless and the helpless, that's besides the point. The point is that we have been challenged and we have been journeying and trying our best with these generation. And the fruit or the product of this kind of effort is that it may trigger options and ideas in other seasons of life, even if nothing seems to be changing at that point in time. It's kind of like the bamboo shoot that needs time to germinate. Nothing seems to happen on the ground, but in due course, the bamboo flourishes. So when we work with the poorest, we are the most challenged. And when we are able to educate amidst the poorest, we will be in a position to move ourselves out of poverty. So with that, thank you very much. I want to return this forum back to the facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your very interesting and engaging presentation, and for also staying under the time limit. I know it was a challenge, and I think you did exceptionally well. I think Dr. Adrian offered a new definition to the word poverty, and also left us with a lot of challenges that I hope that we can take up. On that note, I would now like to invite Dr. Tencho to share his opening statement with the group. Dr. Tencho, just a reminder to unmute yourself.
Dr. Sencho, I think you are not unmuted. We can't hear you. All right.
Plus, the slides are not in presentation mode.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you, Sonam and V-TOB, for giving me this opportunity again. Although it's one of the last of this series, I think to me it's probably the most important aspect of education. Whether we are talking about a child who is adjusting well to the circumstances around him, or is able to adapt to change, or even be flexible and able to cope with the 21st century needs. One child should have a well-rounded personality with the ability to control its emotions. And I dealt with that a little bit in the beginning, the differences between IQ, EQ, and SQ. Today, I wanted to talk on three things One is happiness, the second is mindfulness, and the third is social emotional learning. But because of the constraints in time, I won't be able to go into any detail in any of those three fronts, but I hope that I can give you an overview of what these three things are. Now, Bhutan is known for the gross national happiness, but nobody is talking about individual happiness. How do we make an individual happy? It is by default? Is it through genetics? Is it trainable? And my assertion here is being happy is also a skill that you have to learn and practice. So is having a high emotional quotient. You can learn all this, and there are enough scientific researches now proving that these are possible, and that our brain, which now the neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, we can train our brains to adapt to changes, and we can learn new things. So just quickly going into positive psychology, and a lot of the topics will be shared among all us panelists today here. So I'm not going to go into detail of any of those things, but basically positive psychology is something that we now need to teach in our schools. Is a new science of optimal human functioning that makes people happier, more productive, and more successful. What is the ultimate ambition of human beings? If you ask this question, everybody will say happiness. At the end of everything, what we aim for is happiness. However, happiness is understood by many people in different ways and at different levels. So, in a nutshell, one type of happiness is called a sensual happiness, that you derive pleasure and happiness from the material things you have around, the food, the temperature, the scenery, the car, whatever that you may have, the material things. The second level of happiness is what that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning in life, what you call as the contentment and life satisfaction. And of course, the ultimate happiness of human beings is to self actualize, that makes a person flourish and fulfill their true potential. That's, of course, what most people will aim at. But if you can't reach there, at least we should find some contentment and satisfaction with your life. And this is now proven by neuroscientists, neurochemistry. We have these hormones like adrenaline and cortisol that pumps in when you have to prepare for a fight or flight reaction, when you need to perform. You have hormones like dopamine, serotonin, which motivates you, which empowers you to do things, which drives you to things. We have hormones like endorphins, which makes you feel good and release pain. And all this can be made available. We have the resources within ourselves. All we need to do is how to harvest those hormones, the good hormones we have within ourselves. And we need to learn the art of doing that. There are so many theories how you can make somebody happy. But basically, what it means is you should have a broader outlook to life and have a positive attitude so that you can explore things, you can experiment with actions, and you can broaden your horizon, such as your social relationships. If you ask the simple question, what makes us happy? Some of those glaring answers they will get is positive relationships, which Dr. Adrian Chen has emphasized it, rewarding work, sufficient money, physical activity, sound sleep, good diet, engaging leisure, religious or spiritual practices. Now, look down there. Wealth, fame, appearance, and possessions are not included in that list. And there is a reason. I cannot go into too much of these details. But what you are saying is a lot of people think that if you have a lot of money, you become happier. Yes, money enables you to have a comfortable life. But we also know that beyond a certain amount of money, let's say in the US, 75,000 US dollars, once your income crosses that limit, the happiness doesn't improve. But for Bhutan, yes, happiness is in the urban Bhutan, not in rural Bhutan, because everything is there in urban Bhutan. There's money, there's all the luxuries that are there. So if you do a GHQ in Bhutan, it is consistently showing that our urban people are happier than the rural Bhutan. Now the scientists have proven, and many of us imagine that happiness is dependent on your circumstances of your living, where you are, with whom you are. But science has proven the circumstances attribute only up to 10% of your happiness. 40% depends on your action. What you do, what you think will make you what you are and how you feel. And of course, 50% comes from your genetics, which you can't do much. So there are so many ways to build happiness and to teach happiness in children. And I'm going to quickly go through at least 10 steps that you can do and practice, such as increasing your positive emotions, reducing the impact of negative emotions, and changing the way you think of others rather than thinking only about yourself. So this happiness program, which is taught in many schools now in the Western world, they essentially borrowed a lot of things from Buddhism, from the Oriental sciences actually. But now they are doing it on the ground. And that's why we now have to learn from them. But it is essentially our own philosophies. We need to know how to implement it on the ground. And the Western people are good at packaging things, rolling things out, and implementing them. And probably we have to learn some of the skills from them. Mindfulness, Dr. Adrian mentioned about that. When I visited several schools in Paro in the last year, I saw the children practicing mindfulness for 1 minute. And that to me is a bit of a surprise. I would advocate for mindfulness 24 hours. There's even a mindfulness in sleeping, eating, walking, whatever. But 1 minute mindfulness is just like a chin-up. Bhutanese are used to getting those small elixirs from the monasteries. And you think that elixir will help you cleanse your whole system. I then advocated to schools in Paro, at least let the children practice mindfulness for 5 minutes. Because you have had mindfulness for 1 minute for the past 10 years. It's high time you graduate to at least 5 minutes. And some teachers ask, why 5 minutes? Why not half an hour? Of course, we're all constrained in time. Half an hour will be too difficult. 5 minutes may be something which is achievable for a beginner. And mindfulness doesn't mean we have to do through serious meditation. It is essentially derived from meditation, but the scientific aspect of mindfulness is you just have to be in the present moment, being mindful of your thoughts and emotions, and not getting distracted rather by other things. And you're able to focus your mind on the present moment. And normally we do this with the breathing as the focus of your mindfulness. If you slow your breath and you focus your mind on breathing, you realize that your mind comes and goes, it fleets, it's like a monkey. And you study your mind and how it goes, and rather bring your focus of mind onto the present moment, which is your breathing. If you can train the children on mindfulness, scientifically proven, they can improve your attention skills, your focus, increase resistance to diseases, and bring a stronger capacity to deal with stress and difficulties of life. I say, le jude. Le means action. A lot of us say karma. Karma means action. And if you are mindful when you are acting, obviously your outcome will be good. For example, in studies, if you can focus and concentrate, obviously you will learn and you will remember. So you can create positive karma if you are mindful. And that needs to be trained and taught in schools, and not for 1 minute. Then there are other assets like appreciative inquiry, being inquisitive, learning how some things work. And now we know that from neuroscience, that if you learn things, your brain associations, which are all electrons and electricity pass from one to another, the network becomes stronger. And then you will be able to obviously learn and remember better. The wow factor. Wow. What is it? Wishing others well. In other words, loving kindness and compassion. Bodhicitta. We have this in our culture, in our traditions. But we have to teach children to be compassionate. It is not an inherent human endowment. Yes, we are born with those compassion, as Dalai Lama says, but our indoctrination and the schooling system is taking these things away. They're making us more selfish, narrow-minded, and greedy. We have to teach our young children to care for others, to be compassionate. Appreciative.
Sorry, I'd just like to remind you of time law.
Yes, I know. So I don't know. I'm just, yeah. So I'll just rush through it because I have another part of the thing which I'll rush it. So something to appreciate for the positive. You know, this today, a lot of people become very cynical and skeptical about what people are saying and doing. But if you can appreciate good things in others, it helps your mood. It helps your emotions. The flow. I think a lot of people are aware of it. Flow is matching your goals with your assets or your competencies. And if you reach that flow, then you can achieve the maximum and you enjoy it. I would urge all the teachers to try to reach that level of flow so that you can make the students reach their flow as well. Growth and mindset, Dr. Adrian has already mentioned, I will not go into that. Recognize your strengths. Each of us are given some strengths, and we should recognize them and improve on them. That will make you happier and more successful. And of course, we need to have goals. Restructuring one thinking. Our brains are, by default, made to think negative. This is to protect ourselves. So sometimes we need to restructure the way we think and try to think positively. And that will enable you to do positive things. Your thoughts will influence your emotions. Your emotions can influence your thoughts. And if you can be more mindful of that, then your behavior will be different. Let me go quickly into another part. Sorry, so I'll just go into this. Show another one, which is, sorry. I won't take more than 2-3 minutes for this. Okay. So what is social emotional learning? The process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. That is social emotional learning. And it has 5 components. I'll go quickly through this, and you can read this because I can share this with you. So, self-awareness, knowing yourself, your assets, your drawbacks, then you can manage yourself better. You can control your impulses, manage your stress, set your goals and motivation. Social awareness, knowing of others' point of view, others' perspective, learning to be empathetic and respect for others. Communication. We need communication in relationships. this is something which we need to teach our children, because this is some asset that we need in this 21st century. And responsible decision making, what do you call as life skills that we used to have in the schools, life skills and SPA program, the parent teacher program. But I'm thinking that these are being pushed into the corners of the school curriculum and not come
Doctor,
in the
I'm
forefront.
sorry to interrupt. Is there a
Okay,
screen
I'm
you're
just
supposed to
finishing
be
now.
sharing? Lo?
All right. You're not seeing this.
No, Lo, we
You're not
haven't
seeing
been
the
able to see
screen?
the screen, no, Lo, for your part about social and emotional learning. Is it okay if we come back at the end to you, Lo?
No, actually, I just want to finish it up because, but I can, yeah, you can come back to me later
Last,
because
we'll come back to you
if you're not
later,
seeing
Last.
it now, yeah. Okay, let's
We
go.
haven't been able to see the screen. Last, thank you so much, Dr. Sencho. Last, Lo. I think from both the first and the second presentation, I think there was a sense both the panelists had to tell us that the idea of happiness and mindfulness is predominantly a concept that have roots in our culture. And during the question and answer session, I hope to dive into more on how we can start implementing these in our school. I would now like to call upon Dr. Dorji Wongchokla.
Okay, thank you, Gitso. I'll share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Lo.
Okay, so I'll be basically talking about an area of my research in the last 6 years, which is called well-being in education, and that's primarily under an organization that I work for called the Contentment Foundation. The search for well-being and well-being in education actually began in 2013 when I was substituting temporarily professor for media studies. Now that came after, and when I landed in Sharazi, actually, I didn't have a clue about how to go about with
Dr. Lerji,
teaching. I've never been a teacher.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Your voice is breaking.
Yeah.
Do you mind turning off your video?
Okay, sure.
Yes.
So I will stop my video. Wait. Okay, so as I was saying, I began my teaching career in 2013 after 20 years in the government. And I had no idea about how to go about with teaching. I've never been a teacher. I've been an engineer. I've been a documentary filmmaker. I've been a journalist. I've been the director for the Royal Office for Media, but not a teacher. But anyway, I went with one definition of education, which was to prepare for life. And so when I went through the curriculum, I found the same thing which has been talked about in earlier sessions, that it was not really adequate for them to get a job or really have a holistic view of life. So I added a lot of activities. We went and discovered where say Kintu Lekpa killed Dum Hacham in the famous Kandu Dawzamo legend. We helped farmers complete their rice plantation. We went to look for Amjomo place in Chomang, that's above Shongpu. And we took a lot of selfies, and of course we also had a lot of picnic. So doing that, and of course I taught them not to focus their their mind only on becoming a journalist, but to broaden their horizon. And I must say they took some took that very seriously. And so among the graduates, after they graduated, a few of my students or former students have become army officers, have become police officers. Many have become lecturers, and many have become teachers. So in a way, I would define, or I thought I defined myself as a good teacher, or at least that's what I was told. So that came with a question: what makes a good teacher? And one of the greatest lesson that I learned during that 3 months, and then which led me to continue my profession, or embrace this profession fully, is that no learning actually takes place where a teacher is stressed out, unmotivated, unskilled. And that's what I found among my colleagues in Sharapsi. So the quality of education basically can be equated directly to the quality of teachers, and the quality of teachers can be equated further to the well-being of teachers. So when we talk about well-being, there is well-being inside and there is well-being outside. Now, the well-being outside is all the perks and privileges and the salaries, the life that they lead. But I was more interested about developing the well-being inside, which the two other speakers mentioned before. So that took me on a journey to some of the best places where education is flourishing, like Finland. I also went to UC Berkeley as a visiting scholar, another great place where positive psychology was born. And of course, I also actually had a chance meeting with a young, brilliant scientist called Dr. Daniel Cordaro, who was moving to Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And to my great fortune, he was looking for the same thing. And we collaborated. So in the field of education, there is now more and more the science or the positive psychology that has come into being, and that's called the positive education, led by Professor Martin Seligman of University of Pennsylvania. There is also another movement coming out of Yale and Harvard called the emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, I gathered that is not just the neuroscience part of it, but it also encourages children and students to learn from informal life experiences, like observing your parents, your peers, teachers, and how to manage emotions. Mindfulness, another big area that's being explored, mainly in MIT and Harvard. We also looked at the big spiritual tradition. We have Buddhism, which Dr. Chan mentioned earlier. And a word came out, or I learned this word for the first time, chokshe, which means contentment. But we wanted to go global with this well-being curriculum. And so we looked at other spiritual traditions. So if there is one word that 5,000 years of spiritual traditions actually come together, it's the word called well-being, the contentment. So shalom in Islam, Santosha in Hinduism, Pache in Christianity. These all means peace and contentment. So the result of this collaboration led to developing something called the 4 pillars of well-being, which I think my colleague Srinuddin will elaborate a little later. But it's all based on the 4 pillars of mindfulness, which is the pillar of self-awareness, community, the pillar of self-service, selfless service, self-curiosity, the pillar of growth, and the pillar of contentment, which is the pillar of balance. The next step we took was to Bhutanize that curriculum further, and that was quite tough. So then I realized that actually it's not very difficult, but you could do that by going backwards, by tracing your footsteps. And Dr. Karma Phunsa, I think he was the one who asked, what values do we hold dear as Bhutanese? What do we value as a society? And that, I think, was the question that I asked. And since I don't come from any spiritual tradition, or like I haven't had any monastic education. I just delved on my own life. So I asked the question, what did your mom tell you? What did my mom tell me? So a few things that we have been taught, because this is emotional intelligence, by the way, that our parents tell us to be mindful in anything that I did. So demba tense, kachirabiru demba tense. The other thing that my mom used to tell me was never to, not to do this, not to do that. Say, so that was never my mom's advice. She would always say, know the limits. And of course, to think about the community. So the community part. And of course, to practice Jangsen, which is loving kindness. So these are the values that I was brought up. These are the values that unfortunately it's going into short supply these days. So based on our values, based on the traditions or the spiritual traditions that we have, we devised, or we can concluded, the 4 pillars or the 4 tools, well-being tools for teachers could be SEM, the pillar of self-awareness, Mang, community, Sewa, care and commitment, and Chamse. So if anyone is interested, both the 4 pillars of well-being as well as the well-being tools for teachers, we have more details, but I don't want to go here, but I will definitely leave this slide for anyone who wants to get these, as well as the references to all the things that I've been saying here. Last, what is a why well-being curriculum? Now, Dr. Karamfunso mentioned that the traditional monastic education, the ultimate goal is to seek wisdom, which is what we do, and that is perhaps the main shortcoming of the modern education system. So the modern education system is geared towards knowledge, not wisdom. And maybe that is the shortfall. But how do we learn wisdom? How do we learn the wisdom skills? And since Dr. Sencho earlier mentioned that these are skills that you can actually learn, and recent studies have, or recent medical journals talk about actually the wisdom being a physical space in the brain, no more a philosophical thought, or it's not a domain of the spiritual traditions, but now it is now it centers in neurobiology, not just in philosophy. So there are small areas in the limbic and the prefrontal cortex. These are the 2 areas of the brain which actually activates when people engage in certain behavior, and those behavior are when the emotional intelligence tools are being activated. So Yale has this program called Ruler, which is being now extended to over 3,000 schools, and our proposition is the well-being tools for teachers, which has the EQ plus the Bhutanese values. Now, both these tools aim at activating or exercising the wisdom brain. And so wisdom can be trained, as Dr. Senjo mentioned earlier. And I assume that this is what our traditional monastic learning have been doing that for 2,500 years. So the question is, can we replicate that, or can we take some of the techniques and tools into our modern education system as we craft a new way forward? So that's about it, and all this comes under what we call the social emotional learning. So social emotional learning is not just what is coming out from the labs in MIT or in Yale, but the traditional learning, the parental learning, parental education, pamagiyenten, that all falls under the social emotional learning. And I hope that the new education system can embrace these and not really push that into as a I don't know, weekly once a meet curriculum and so on and so forth. So how am I doing, Kwitso, with time? Do I have some time?
I think you're right on time, though.
What is my recommendation? One word: trust. And what I mean by that is that we are not short of ideas or innovations in anything that we do or we try to address. An education system or a new education system is going to be no different. I can see that there are a lot of ideas and innovation, but we have a problem with trust. We have some problem. We have some trust issue because we don't recognize each other's work here in Bhutan. We don't respect each other's work. It's become more like a vegetable market where everyone wants to sell their vegetable, but no one really wants to talk to each other. So people to people trust is something that I would invite as we move ahead as the first thing to discuss in the education reform or civil service reform. It holds true for both. We don't lack resources, but we lack resourcefulness, and I think that was what Dr. Chan mentioned earlier. One of my favorite characters in history is Dr. Ambedkar, who wrote the Indian Constitution. He started with a guru under a tree, and he became what he became. So it's not that we need resources, it's not that we need beautiful classrooms. It's not that we don't have this or that, but I think we need to be more resourceful with what we have. And of course, yeah, we really don't have big trust major issues. I think we have some trust issues, and if we can actually focus on this first, I think any reform of any sort will happen in this country. So thank you very much. That's my presentation, or whatever you may call it.
Yes, thank you, Dorji, for Dr. Dorji. Sorry, thank you, Dr. Dorji, for your presentation, and for also shedding light on the importance of securing the mental well-being of our teachers. Next, I would like to call upon Mr. Kazong. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Mr. Kazong, you're next.
Thank you. I think I should also learn how to get a PhD from Dr. Dorji and Dr. Adrian.
I am so sorry for the mistake.
Let me share my screen. Is this coming through, La?
Yes.
Yes, Lo. We can see your presentation.
Okay, great.
Can you keep
Kuzu Zangpula from the mountains of Kabesa, north of Thimphu, the mating crowd of Thimphu. We are in a red zone area in Chamjeka. And so, as Dr. Adrian mentioned, this event has come to us. And I think we can already realize how learning can happen. Learning is going to the communities. So I am here learning from you all, and I'd like to thank the preceding panelists for very insightful presentations. And this has actually made it's going to make my presentation easier, in the sense what we are trying to do is practice some of those what you all mentioned and took us through in the last 45 minutes or so. I am representing the Bhutan Education and Technology Academy Park, to look like a corporate presentation, but we are trying to implement some of the key elements coming out of the preceding speakers, as well as in the last couple of days, I was part of that session on technology in education, and has been following other sessions. So it has been a wonderful experience. My amygdala has tempered down after having been in India for 3 years, working for a health and well-being company, largely researching holistic health and well-being. And that has been a life-changing experience for me. So I'm going to talk about experiential and social learning today in the learning and development framework that we have in the Beta Park. And thank you once again to the organizers for this opportunity. So what's up? Why the Beta Park? I'll be reading this out. What we saw is what you all see, what all of us see, not only in Bhutan, I think largely globally, especially in the developing world. The problem is haphazard access to appropriate technologies and lack of an employable entrepreneurial workforce. What we are coming in is with a solution to supply global economy entrepreneurial workforce by harnessing technology for equity in education. Dr. Edian mentioned tech savvy and learner centered. I think that's the key phrase that ties up with what we are looking at in terms of deploying technology for equity in education. Breaking this down, what are the specific problems worth solving or that we are trying to solve? There is limited market-ready technology and business-skilled talent pool in Bhutan. A large number of students, about 5,000, go out abroad to pursue higher education. And given the opportunities, they would love to stay back and study in Bhutan. That is found out from the research that has been done as well. And out of the 5,000 or so who go out, about 4,000 students go on private funding. You can see the impact on the economy. Then there is, of course, mismatch between education and labor market needs. There are about 60% of the graduates being unemployed in the market right now, and the industry doesn't get what they need. So there is this mismatch, and this has been there for a long time. Since I joined the civil service way back in 1996, we have been talking this, and as far as I can remember, then there is no entrepreneurial culture, and this is evident in the way how a lot of programs are being introduced into the market, but all haphazard again. I mean, there is no coordinated effort to making an impact out of this money spent on these programs everywhere by the government, by the corporate world, by the private sector as well. And of course, there is no product first mindset. We're just all closed within the Bhutan boundaries, and we never think of scaling up products to the global market, or not even to the region. So these are problems that we face, and what we are offering to the Bhutanese market, and bringing this to the market here is a market-ready workforce that we want to create environment for to serve the industry needs and the organizational needs. Corporate training programs, which are designed based on needs, and not just because there is a budget you need to do a training, but because there is a need for the company, there is a need for the organization. We want to do it differently. We want to see that the training programs that we offer make sense even after getting back to work. Advisory services, I don't think I need to explain this. And we also, on the other side of the business that we have designed, we have the tech park facilities and services. startups advisory and incubation center, including opportunities to
83 participants.
Did somebody speak? Sorry.
Please continue. I think someone had unmuted their microphones.
Oh, Las Kitsu, thank you. So we want to do this ecosystem for incubatees and startups, including providing funding access and other support services, so that they can entirely focus on the product or the business idea that they are working on. Serviced offices, I mean, for entrepreneurs and small businesses who are having a tough time, not getting the required, support services. Co-working community space. People can come here, take a daily pass or a weekly pass, and work with us. And we are going to tie up with the cafes around Thimphu, Paro, all over Bhutan, and even beyond, so that our community has that seamless moment. And of course, a trending that's happening is the digital nomads. So we will also be providing services for digital nomads, for people to come and develop a product or come for a spiritual experience. So these are what we are offering in the beta park. Our L&D framework comprises of 6 elements: a model, facilitation approach, instructional design, assessment methods, our offerings, and what are the progression paths that we foresee for our graduates. So in terms of the learning and development model, and this brings us to experiential learning and social learning part of the whole L&D framework that we have. So our model is based around the corporate learning and development model, the 70-20-10 model, where 70% is experiential learning, 20% is social learning, and 10% is formal learning. And given the preceding speakers have highlighted on what this would all mean, I'm not going to define this. The idea basically is to I guess reverse the pyramid, right? From a 80-20 teaching practical to a 70-20-10 model, to be more practical and to make our students more holistically built to go out into the market. Offers flexibility, encourages collaboration, and facilitates student independence, promotes student ownership, meaningful experiential development, and of course, we have heard of KSAs, but not really in the sense of how these are applied at work or as an entrepreneur sometimes.
Yes, Mr. Kazal, I would just like to remind you of your time, though. Yeah.
How much time do I have?
You have hit your 10-minute mark, though, but if you could take the next few minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes then. So maybe, yeah, thank you. So in terms of facilitation approach, largely, I think the current system we have is the lecture style, but we are going to do a mix of lecture, coaching, group, and activity styles. And in terms of examples of experiential and social learning, which is which is what I want to explain, we would have under experiential learning, research, assistantships, projects, practicums, case studies, apprenticeships, exchange programs, and even problem-based learning, working with companies in the industry. Social learning would be conferences, focus groups, assignment mentorship, social networking, using collaboration tools. So this is what it means. And in the context of the current education system, it is meant as theory, practical, and OJT. And practical and OJT is what comprises a combination of experiential and social learning. This slide I added because Dr. Doji wanted to hear something about the Search Inside Yourself program that I was part of last year, SIYLI.org. What we have in the ecosystem here is also a health and well-being center as part of our infrastructure development, and I can relate this to Dr. Edian's a slide there in terms of reflection, contemplation through meditation, yoga, and attention training, as Dr. Senchu mentioned, self-awareness and self-management, which Dr. Dorji touched on. And these are all programs that we will be offering as part of our learning and development environment in the campus. Assessment methods would be continuous, not an exam, one-time exam kind of assessment. We offer 3 diploma programs, level 3, level 4, and level 5, and they have the opportunity after finishing level 5. This is the last slide. Sorry, level 5. They have the students have the opportunity to go for a level 6, which is an equivalent of a final year degree in colleges in the country. Right now, RUB doesn't allow it, but we are working with some of the colleges here. We are already partnering with universities in the UK and Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Malaysia to send our students for higher studies. And our vision is to build an inclusive, world-class technology-enabled education and innovation ecosystem. So with that, I will end my presentation. And thank you, Tashidalek.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanga. Thank you for your presentation. It looks like there's a lot of innovative learning happening at Beta Bhutan, and I hope that more institutions in Bhutan become more intentional about social and emotional learning. Now I would like to call upon Ms. Natalia Mufal for her opening statement.
Okay, good afternoon, and I don't have a presentation. I will just speak. If it's needed, I can provide to organizers. I have one pager, kind of more or less, that I will speak about now. What first I want to say that I want to speak not as education specialist as I was presented, but much more as medical psychologist. And I have PhD in medical psychology, in behavior of personality, in life significant situations. Why I'm speaking about it? Because I do think that now the whole world is experiencing life significant situation. And that is why I will really speak today much more from a point of view of medical psychologist than as education manager. First of all, what I want to highlight very strongly. So children are experiencing medical stress, and we need to support children's emotional development during these times of crisis, confusion, and anxiety that all of us and children as well are facing. And there is considerable evidence of the impact of trauma on a child's brain development and her or his capacity to learn. This is very important because when we are speaking about social emotional learning, we should keep in mind that brains are damaged because of this crisis, because of anxiety, and then we need to focus on helping parents and caregivers to create enabling learning environment at home to support children continuing learning at home, or when schools are opened in schools, but then still children will return back to homes, and then it will be all the time needed support for them. And then what I want very strongly to say, that system is not yet fully ready to take children back. So basically, it's the whole problem of teachers, because it should be preparation of teachers through coaching programs, for example, to adjust pedagogical practice and content to the learning levels and needs of children. Just imagine, children are back to school. They were out of school for many months. They forgot how to learn. They forgot how to see and to communicate with their friends, with teachers, etc. So it should be pretty clear actions from education system in place, how to protect children from learning losses. And then recent studies, for example, suggest that reorienting curriculum to children's ability levels and ensuring that coverage of topics will be much more broader, and then children are still gaining competency to improve learning. And then we really need to provide different options and solutions. For example, this pandemic showed really that value of teachers are very high, and the potential of technology to assist in remote learning is very high. But then how to estimate and how these high and low tech solutions can be blended and can support effective learning for children and young people. So learning goes beyond the school walls and requires much more stronger and efficient education systems. So once again, what I want to say that long-term effects of school closure is very important point, and even after 3 months closure of schools, it's internationally recognized. Children are losing more than a year learning, and we have now much more months. So then how the system can adjust and what can be provided to ensure that children are supported and they're getting appropriate, for example, ICT skills. And ICT skills should be part of the curriculum, and expanding opportunities to access computer programming should be kind of really in place. My last point, what I want to say very strongly, so I do think that the government should invest more into pre-primary education, and pre-primary education can be home-based programs, and in these home-based programs, doesn't matter where it will be, can be provided positive and stimulating environment. And really my last point, it's about we are not fully focusing on children most marginalized. I will speak only about one issue related to children with disabilities. We had separate session on inclusive education, but it's a very critical point. For a few years, we are kind of in process of discussion, but it's not yet done. There are really important for education system to ensure that cognitive and learning disabilities are addressed. Now we are much more focusing on physical disabilities, which is not fully education area. It's much more about Ministry of Health area. And then it should be appropriate curriculum development, appropriate training for special education teachers, and then it can be really address the learning needs of these group of children with disabilities. So thank you very much. I think it's the my points, and I am ready to answer any questions, if any. So my main point, I would summarize very quickly, that focus should shift from right to access to education to right to learn. We are still pretty much trying to ensure that everybody in school, but not really thinking about quality of education and what can be addressed to ensure quality of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Natalia, for shedding light on very important issues. I think there is a need for our education to become more inclusive. I would now like to call upon Ms. Tsiring.
Thank you so much, La Kitso. And thank you so much to Sir Sonam Nobu and V-TOB for this wonderful initiative and for giving me this tremendous platform. My name is Tsiring and I've had the incredible opportunity to test out a social emotional learning, or as I'll call it from here, an SEL program called the 4 Pillars of Wellbeing with small groups of teachers and students in Bhutan. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share what I've learned from my experience. And before I start, I just want to say I'm by no means an expert, but simply someone who is sharing my story. So I was 12 years old when I left Bhutan to go to boarding school in India. And since then, I've spent more than half of my life living abroad. And I've been very privileged because my parents gave me everything that they could. And the most important thing for them was an education. But even if I had great opportunities in my life, I only learned critical thinking as a skill in my first year of college at age 20. I remember realizing at that point that I had spent the first 20 years of my life believing that I was stupid. I remember thinking that now that I'm smart, I would finally be able to achieve success and be happy. So I suppose I looked quite successful on paper in my 20s, but happy? Not really, not at all. I felt alienated and isolated wherever I went, actually. And when I finally came back to Bhutan a few years ago, things just felt like they got worse. I was too afraid and embarrassed to seek therapy, but dreamt of the day when I would find a psychologist who would fix whatever was broken inside of me. So even though I am Bhutanese by citizenship, I continuously felt like an outsider in my own country, and reassimilating back to Bhutan's culture was very hard for me, and I'm still learning to do so today. The turning point for me was in 2019 when I came across the 4 Pillars of Wellbeing program. And it transformed me almost immediately because I was just so ready for change. Today, because of this SEL program, I'm happy to share that I'm working towards becoming the best version of myself so that I can give my best to my community and my country. I have cultivated a deep sense of purpose and belonging. And while some days will naturally be hard, overall, I'm learning to be happy and optimistic. I see now that I was never broken. I just needed to understand myself better. Well-being has taught me how to flourish as a human being. It's taught me how to accept myself, and it's taught me how to be resilient. So at age 30, I finally learned self-worth. Today, I know that I'm worthy because I'm human and because I'm alive, not because of my abilities or accomplishments or possessions. Sometimes I feel robbed that I only learned to accept myself in my 30s. But I'm not here to blame anyone or blame myself. I'm here because I know that the story of me is the story of us. So many Bhutanese of my generation have grown up with the internet in an increasingly globalized and connected, or should I say disconnected world. Today, a Bhutanese child with a smartphone does not even have to leave the country to lose their cultural values and to feel a lack of belonging right here in the place where they were born and are growing up. They are coming of age in a global culture that keeps changing so fast, and many are falling through the cracks because they don't know how to navigate this world. I don't have any regrets in my life, and I'm very grateful. But sometimes I do wonder how things would have been if my education had offered me SEL skills earlier in my life. So, what are the four pillars of well being? My colleague Dr. Doji already went a little bit into this, and I'll just share here for the purposes of today's discussion a very general overview so you can get an idea of what this program offers. The four pillars overlap and they complement each other. While there are basic psychological tools introduced in the program, like Dr. Doji said, most of the content is nothing new. It aligns really well with Bhutanese cultural values, and it addresses all the 10 core life skills that are mandated by the Ministry of Education. And for me personally, this is simply GNH in education. So the first pillar is mindfulness, the pillar of self-awareness. It teaches us the skill of paying attention in the digital age. We always tell our children to pay attention, but have we ever taught them how to pay attention? And in fact, do we ourselves know how to pay attention? We live in a world full of distractions, and mindfulness helps us to organize our thoughts and to not lose sight of what is important. The second one is community, the pillar of selfless service. It taught me, as I shared earlier, I felt isolated growing up for most of my life. The community pillar taught me that humans are social by nature, and we flourish when we help each other instead of when we put ourselves first. As the world becomes even more competitive and individualistic, community teaches us to ask, what can I offer instead of what's in it for me? The third one is self-curiosity, the pillar of self-realization. Humans are born curious, but we crush that innate curiosity by discouraging children to ask questions about the world around them. And unfortunately, the education system has a bad reputation of crushing curiosity in children. Do many of us adults even know who we really are? If someone takes away our name, our gender identity, our family ties, our titles, our nationality, what is left? Who are you really? Self-curiosity teaches us that we have to know ourselves. We have to know who we really are if we want to realize our greatest potentials. And the last one is contentment and balance, the pillar of self-acceptance. It teaches us about our emotions and the nature of emotions. It offers us tools to learn how to be kind to ourselves as we become more aware of our inner worlds and learn how to navigate those experiences on a day-to-day basis. So over the last 2 years, I've been going around talking about this 4 pillars of well-being program to people. And I've had the opportunity to test this out with some teachers and students who are interested in this program during the pandemic year. So firstly, I'll talk about the students really quickly. I got to work with a small group of Big C students. So this is grade 10 and 12. So they were preparing to take the Big C during the pandemic year. Making the time to teach well-being helped us to create the space for these students to share their hopes and fears in a safe environment where they would not be judged. They learned that no matter how stressed, scared, or alone they felt, that those emotions would not stay forever. They learned that instead of trying to push away or suppress their anger and their frustrations, they should just try to make friends with them, because each of these emotions was there to give them important information about their environment and that they would go away in time. While trying to navigate the developmental challenges of simply being teenagers, many with self-esteem and self-worth issues, and some with some even with unstable home situations, they had to take on this pandemic and deal with fears of whether COVID would get their loved ones, whether they would pass the make or break big C exams, or whether even the world would end, because they didn't know any better and they needed that support. They learned that there are simple tools they can use and habits they can form in their daily lives to help themselves navigate these inner and outer worlds. With this program, we've been trying to teach them how to build resilience and how to deal with uncertainty. With the teachers, unfortunately, I was not able to spend as much time with them as I'd like. And my learning was that most of the teachers believe in the importance of well-being for themselves and for the students, but they were just too overwhelmed with too many things already on their plates as teachers. And yes, this was in the pandemic year, but I actually began testing this pilot in mid to late 2019. And even then, the situation wasn't that much different in terms of the teacher's time limitations. I learned that as you go up the grade level, the teacher has less and less time for anything outside of academics. A teacher, in fact, even shared candidly with me at one point that outside of exams, it felt that everything else was an add-on, an extra responsibility, or an optional program. And this to me showed the content and exam-driven nature of our current system. Now, I want to share that an important point here, that any school-based SEL program must be for the teacher first, then only the students. The burnt out teacher will have nothing to give to their students except their frustrations and their exhaustion. And this in the long run will do more damage than good. Anyway, we still got to spend some time with the teachers overall, and we did our best with the limited time. We did our best with what we had. We learned to be more patient, forgiving, and understanding of each other. We did a lot of unlearning, and in the end, we learned to be less judgmental, a little more kind, and in doing so, formed a stronger community in support of each other's mental health. So regarding my recommendation, I'll just share it later during the Q&A session. Anyway, I don't think it's anything different from what most people are sharing. So I'll just end my presentation here by sharing an excerpt from a speech that His Majesty gave at the Samti College of Education in 2014. He said, you cannot tell children to be strong if you are not strong yourself. If you don't know anything about the subject that you are teaching, how much of it are you going to give your students? You cannot give what you do not have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Turang, for sharing about your experience and also bringing your expertise in the fields of SEL with us. I think you made a very important point about how teachers are burned out and how they're overworked. And I believe that a teacher that is burned out and overworked can't deliver their best to their students. Not their fault. I think anybody that's overworked can't function and work at their best levels. On that note, I would like to call upon our last speaker for today, Ms. Youngdon. I know you're having internet issues. Are you still here with us? She's there. Okay.
Hello. Am I being heard loud and clear?
Yes, you are. Over to you.
I'm sorry, I don't think I'll be turning my video on because I don't think the internet's going to support it. So just imagine a beautiful young lady. That's me. First of all, thank you so much for having me on this. When someone approached me saying, do you want to be a part of it? I was quite intimidated, to be honest, because a lot of the panelists here are, well educated. They have like so much experience and they come from like such rich backgrounds. I was like, what can I offer? Then I thought about my own personal experience and First of all, kudos to Anna Tsiring, such a wonderful and beautiful story. And just like her, I thought, let me just share from my experience and my educational journey, and yeah, see how people think about it. Wait, am I still on?
Yes,
Hello?
we can still hear
Oh,
you there. Hello.
okay.
You're audible.
I went offline. So first, let me start by saying that being a young person in this day and age is really, really hard. We have to be like active on all kinds of social media, have like a lot of followers. We have to eat well and live our life and travel, because this is the only life you get. And we have to date so many people and date the right guy and not be in a toxic relationship. We have to focus on our career and question our sexuality and really support LGBT. And we also follow Kylie Jenner and other celebrity relationships. We follow the Black Lives Matter movement. We are on top of all the Netflix latest TV shows, and there's so much pressure on us to live our life passionately. And at the same time, especially being a Bhutanese kid, there's this also responsibility of taking care of your family. And also now reaching a certain age, there's this pressure of oh, you should get married, have kids. So having all these things around me, sometimes it really, I mean, I'm not representing all of the young people of Bhutan, but hopefully some of the young voices that feel that it does give you a lot of anxiety when you think about your present and when you think about your future. And you really do start questioning what is it that I'm putting out in the world, as a human being, as an individual. What is my life? You look at other people and they seem to be living the best life, and you sometimes really question, what am I doing with my life? And what am I living my life to my fullest potential? And am I living my life to am I serving a purpose in this world? So with these questions, when I graduated high school, I had all these questions. I think it was the first time I was in the safe, protected bubble of sorts in the education system, in the schooling system. And then suddenly when you come out of it, you ask all these questions to yourself. And the really, really sad part is, and I have to say this, I have to be really honest here, is the 13 years of schooling that I had in Bhutan did not prepare me at all for the real world. I was very confused. I mean, 1+1 is 2. I know that, A, B, C, D, I know that, but how do I use everything that I know and learned in school to face the challenges and the problems in the real world? And that's when I realized that the schooling that I had was not enough for me to prepare for life. And I decided to take a break, and decided maybe I should take a break and take a gap year and not go off to college straight away and follow the norm. And when I took that gap year, I think that's the first time I really truly learned, because I was in a community, I was doing radio, I was like volunteering in a lot of youth groups. I met so many different people. And I'd like to share the story of one of the people that I met in this time was this nun from France. I was very fortunate to be in this conference where a bunch of nuns came, and they were talking about mindfulness and happiness, and we were in this big huge stadium, and I got the opportunity to hear their talk. And after the talk, this nun, she is a follower of Thich Nhat Hanh. She sat next to me, and we were having a nice conversation. And I said to her, I really enjoyed your talk. Your talk was so inspiring. And when you were talking, I was smiling a lot. So you really made me smile. Thank you so much. So I was really, thanking her for her talk. And she turned to me, and this was one of those moments that really changes your life and you're fully present. She turned to me, she held my hand, and she said, when you think of me, you smile a lot. Who else makes you smile? And I said, oh, my mother makes me smile, my best friend makes me smile, and there are a few people who make me smile. And she goes, all these people make you smile, but when you think of yourself, do you smile? So I was like, goosebump, chills down my spine, and I was like, oh my God, this is huge. When I think of myself, do I smile? So that's when I realized that I also needed to kind of look within and think of what kind of person I was becoming. Not only drawing inspiration from others, but also be if I were to meet myself in the middle of the road, will I like myself? Was kind of the question that really started my education and this whole process of the design education. Instead of going off to a university, I decided maybe I should kind of design my own education and see how it goes. I called it the I education, just I was just trying to be funny that time. And I think my family was like, as long as my mom was super supportive. I mean, even if I say go off to college, you're not going to listen. So just like do whatever, just be happy. As long as I don't have to like pay for it and you don't create any trouble, you're fine. So but I started on this journey where everything that I wanted to do, right? So you make a list of like, someday I'm going to do this, someday I'm going to do that. So I made a list of things that I really wanted to do. First was I really wanted to try out carpentry because I like the idea of creating something. Then I really wanted to do farming. And so I made a different list, and I really wanted to travel and get out of Bhutan by myself and see and experience that. So I made a list, and I was like, let's just try it. Let's just apply and see how it goes. So I did train for a year in Woodcraft Center and tried out making furniture. It was a wonderful experience. By God, once you know how a furniture is made, you look at tables and chairs completely differently. A lot of you are sitting on a chair right now and we take it for granted. But when you actually sit down, try to make it with your hands, it's very difficult to get the measurements and the balancing and the design, everything correctly. So it really did teach me a lot to appreciate the small things in life. One of the other things that I also did as a part of just this whole design education that I was trying out was I tried collecting parking fee for a week. I couldn't do it for more than a week because it's so tiring. I think the respect for me for parking fee collectors has increased to 100-folds because you have to stand there in the sun, run after cars. You have to run after cars and make sure you get the money and like they don't run off without paying the parking fee. And so that's like their income. And you do make good money. Like if you can stand there the whole day, run after cars, you do make good money. But I tried it for a week and it was a wonderful experience. Another thing that I also participated in and tried was I participated in a lot of youth activities, especially when it came to sexual education. So Renew and YDF, they had like so many workshops on sex education and body positivity and sex positivity. So this was like the first time. I'm like 19 years old, have no idea what all this is. And I'm really grateful that my entry towards this whole world of exploring sex came through that, like came through the right way of like attending these workshops, talking about it, hearing from the right people, and also learning a lot about LGBTQ and meeting people who are transgender, meeting people who are bisexuals, who are gays, who are lesbians, and like talking to them and thinking like, hey, they're also normal people just like us. It's just that they're born in the wrong body sometimes. So even those small things, right? I think the biggest highlight for me was when I took the initiative to travel by myself to India, and I disappeared for 6 months just by myself traveling in India. And they do say that being a young girl, you should not be alone in India. And there's like it's scary and everything, which is true. But at the same time, I was very aware. I was taking precautions, and I had a great time. It was one of those experiences when you really go out there in the world, and when no one knows you, when no one knows your name. Here in Thimphu town, I walk 10 steps and I meet someone I know, right? But when you're traveling alone in a country, you have no idea where to go. It's quite an experience, and it does really open up your mind and really like exposes you to just like be confident in yourself. I'm not sure whether I'm online. I'm just gonna check quickly if someone can respond.
Yes, you are.
Okay, let's this.
We can hear you.
Continuing. So yeah, just like even that whole travel by myself was such an experience. And I think now I'm in that space where I'm realizing that I had all these experiences, and I see that learning for me especially did not happen in school at all. I learned from people and the people around me. I thought that I was really kind. I met someone who was more kind than me. I thought, oh, I think I'm intelligent, and I met someone who's more intelligent than me. I feel like, oh, I'm the worst. Like I'm the worst. I'm really poor and everything. And I met someone who was much more worse than me. So for me, a lot of my life education came from the people around me, and I've had the opportunity to meet such amazing people. One of them is, I think, attending this Zoom is Anna Turing's mother, Ma'am Deki. I really have to give her a big shout out, because with her, what I learned was something called the Design for Change, which focuses on problem solving. And that's kind of where I'm going to get at. Is when I first started out, I talked about how it's so difficult to be a young person and you're going out in the world and you have no idea what you're doing. And I realized at that time, after so many years, I realized that two things were missing in my life, which The first is decision making, and the second is problem solving. Because throughout your life, there's never a moment where you're not making decisions, where you're not solving problems. Forget about going out there in the world and being a legend. If you can wake up in the morning and decide whether you're going to get tea or coffee or go by walk or taxi, like those small decisions lead to the big decisions. And the next is problem solving. Even like small problems within your friends, within the family, even problems at your work, everything comes down to decision making and problem solving. And these two tools, I felt like was not taught in schools at all. And only because of the experiences that I had after my high school was like, only then I realized that these two things were really important. And when I was with Ma'am Nikki working on Design for Change, that's when I learned like, wow, kids can like, solve problems and design for themselves. There are 4 aspects. First, you recognize what the problem is, then you find a solution for it, and then you implement it and see how it goes. So that simple steps for me was a huge eye-opener. It really changed my life. And I think in everyday moments too, you can totally use it. Like first you recognize the problem, then you come up with a solution, and then you do something about it and see how it goes. Mostly the schooling system in Bhutan right now is they give you the problems and they give you the answers. And it doesn't really encourage students to take their learning in their own hand, or students to be their own change makers and to solve problems and to be, because I mean, sometimes I think we underestimate kids a lot. We think like they're so young and they don't really know much about the world and they might not have good ideas. But I think kids can surprise us. I have met so many wonderful kids in the amazing journey of Design for Change, who were like they could give a run for their money to the adults as well. They were like amazing, solving all kinds of problems. But I think I'm just rambling right now, just trying to speak from the heart and speak from my experience. But at the end of the day, what I want to get at is really focus on the kids, like give the power back to the kids and let them design their own education. Because for me, that really worked out. Now I'm in the stage where I'm like, okay, I had all these experiences and I feel ready to further and like, someone was talking about the growth mindset. So I feel like, oh, I need more knowledge. I need more learning. So maybe I'm going to go out and officially go to university and study. But see, that also came after so many of different experiences. And as an individual, I made that decision. And when it came to my family, my mother's been such a huge support of whatever I did. And if she had forced me to go off to college, I don't think all these things I would have learned. So basically, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is, really give the power back to the kids of letting them decide what they want to study and letting kind of designing the education for the kids centric, and also equipping them with decision making and problem solving skills. Because when they are 18 and go off into the real world, that's all they're faced with. And if they don't have these right tools, it's going to be very hard for them to even cope up with the daily stress. So these are just some of the things that I was thinking about. And of course, a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about was already mentioned by some other speakers. So I kind of cut that out. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young Dunlop, for sharing your story with us. Can I just say that you've had such a fascinating experience, I think, with educating yourself. Not going to college, I think, takes so much courage and bravery, and I applaud you for that. I do go to college because I don't think I have the discipline or the courage to design my own education, but I couldn't agree more with you, La. I think it is time that we give freedom to children. I really think that there is a lot of merit in giving freedom and holding them accountable and teaching them that way, La. I would now like to call upon Dr. Tencho again. I did promise 3 minutes. I did promise him 3 minutes at the end of after all the panelists were done talking. So, Dr. Tencho, are you still here with us?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Kito. I can't put my video on, but I will share my slides. I hope you can see it now. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, good. I can't show my video, so anyway, I'm not so handsome, so it's fine. You can hear me, all right? Okay,
yes, we can hear you as well.
Yeah, I was defining social emotional learning, and basically is a process through which children, adults effectively apply the knowledge, attitude, skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. We're talking about all-rounded, well-rounded person here. And then I was basically saying the components of social emotional learning, there are basically 5 big components, and they are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. I'm not going to go into too much of these details, but I think this slide is for everybody to have a look and share. But I just want to basically emphasize on the importance of social emotional learning, what research has to say, so that people like us in Bhutan will at least appreciate or even recognize, as Dorji was saying earlier, that we don't seem to appreciate what other people know or do. We only seem to be living in our own worlds. So let me go to those research findings. But before that, I want to say that this can very well be put in the classroom. And this has been done in many countries, especially in the West. So you can have a cell curriculum and instruction structured in the classroom. You can have a school-wide practice and policies. And at the end of this presentation, I'll show you some of the links. It is not my making. I just took them from some of those. And basically, we're talking about CASEL. CASEL is collaborative academic, social, emotional learning. Is a US-based institution which develops all this. All right. And then, of course, we have SEL in the homes and communities. So it is basically all around. It's not just focused just on the school, but it is for everybody in the society, in the community. And I want to go straight into some of those research findings, okay? So this is the meta-analysis. Science links SEL to student gains. This was a landmark study done in 2011. It was a meta-analysis of 213 studies involving school-based universal SEL programs, including over 270,000 students from 0 to 12 years. And what does the study say? It enhances social emotional skills of children. It improves their attitudes about self, others, and the school. You know, people are going to school. It gives a positive classroom behavior for children. And there is the 11 percentile point gain on standardized achievement test. What do you mean is the cognitive tests or whatever academic test you do, there's an 11 percentile gain. Now, what it reduces? It reduces conduct problems or behavioral issues in children. It also reduces emotional distress, such as self-harm, suicidal ideation, and things like that. I'll show you another landmark study. And this study was done in 2017. And they have involved more than 82 programs and 97,000 children. And it was done over a 6 to 18 months period. And what does it say? Yes, it enhances academic performance, enhances social emotional learning skills, and develops positive attitudes and positive social behaviors or pro-social behaviors. It lowers conduct problems in children, emotional distress, and drug use. So, yes, science has proven, and there are ample methods and practices. This is being done. It's not something which just happened in the last year or so. It's been happening for at least a decade now in the Western countries, including mindfulness teaching. And whatever the impact on teachers, somebody was saying, I think Chinle or Singh was saying, that we cannot expect the children to learn if the teachers do not know themselves. Yeah. So social emotional learning benefits adults as well. Teachers who possess social emotional competencies are more likely to stay in the classroom longer. That means less burnout and less attrition rate. Flourishing. managing behavior in the classrooms, that's of the children, serving as behavioral role models for children, and regulating their own emotions. I have observed many teachers losing their temper and going after children. I've observed many of them, and it was sometimes quite difficult for us to even see. So this sort of things can be managed well. Um, yeah, adults, you can help. Kindergartners who were stronger in SL competence were more likely. So if they did it in the kindergarten or ECCDs or preschool, these children graduate from high school. That means the drop rates are lesser, they complete college degrees, and they obtain stable employment in young adulthood. So the study was not just done as a one-off thing, but also they followed children over many years and seen how they're progressing in their lives. And less likely to be living in public housing. I mean, this is a context in the Western world. Public housing is when you don't have your own house and you are put in one of those paid houses. Is receiving public assistance or dole social security benefits, involved with the police. So you have less behavioral issues and you are less in those detentions. So on an average, if you invest $1 in this SEL, the gains is $11. The return is $11. Let's talk in purely sort of monetary terms. But I think it's much more than that. And a lot of testimonies are given by different players in the community, how SEL is helpful, employers, students, parents, teachers. So the value, the employers, 92% of employers said that people with SEL, they want to have those people. And I remember in the first session, Karma was the RSCB ED was mentioning about the marketing skills or marketable skills of potential employees when they look for them. And so this SEL helps him complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, cognitive flexibilities. All this will be enhanced if children are exposed or taught social emotional learning. I don't want to go into too much of this now. Let me just show you the last part of this where they have, so these are all the resources. You can go into this and then you can actually, if you are in the school, you have some guide here. In the classroom, you have the guide, you have, if you have to do something at home, there's some more resources. CASEL, Collaborative Academic Social Emotional Learning Organization, is in the US. I would like to end again by reinforcing this idea that all these are skills and they have to be learned through practice, not by didactic teaching in the classroom. I remember Sir Michael mentioning a few days ago that if you have to teach a child how to drive a car, the child or the whoever has to get into the car at one stage and start driving the car. You can have endless hours of teaching in the classroom, but you will not make this person drive the car. Same is with swimming, for example, a skill. Same is with riding a bicycle, as simple as that. I always mention that. You cannot just teach a child in the classroom how to ride a bicycle. You have to let the child ride the bicycle. He will fall many times, but that is part of learning. I want to impress this idea to our teachers that if you want to make your children skilled enough, well-rounded and responsible and wholesome education, you have to let the children learn, make mistakes, guide them, mentor them, facilitate them, but don't indoctrinate them. And that is part of our problem. I would like to stop here. Thank you very much, Kitso.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, La Doctor. Thank you for sharing data and for sharing resources with the group. I'd also like to thank all the panelists for presenting and sharing your knowledge with us. Before we end, I would like to ask a few questions. Move on to the question answer segment of EduTALK. These questions can be answered by all panelists. You can just unmute yourself and please feel free to answer the question. Feel free to answer the question. My first question is, I'd like to focus a little bit on teachers. I think it has become very apparent to me that safeguarding emotional and social well-being of our teachers is very important. So I'd like to ask our panelists here, how can schools and perhaps even the ministry safeguard the emotional, social well-being of our teachers? Please feel free, panelists, to unmute yourself and to answer.
May I?
Yes,
Kezang here. So, in terms of how social and emotional skills or learning could be integrated into the larger education framework, I think the Education Ministry has already embarked on this journey, the search inside yourself, training for teachers, which was done, I think, a year back, and there was another batch which trained civil servants, private sector, civil society, people like us as a group. So I think for integrating social and emotional learning and skills development, it has to start with the teachers, because if you want to impart that skill to your student, then you need to really be equipped with those skills yourself. And social and emotional skills are not theoretical at all. You need to practice it yourself, and then you'll be able to effectively transmit or communicate it to the second, to your students in this case. So programs like that, and as Dr. Doji also mentioned, I think there are a lot of other elements of Buddhism that we can integrate into the education system, and it has to start first with imparting those skills to our teachers, so that they actually don't realize that they are burning out. They're aware that they're breathing in, breathing out, and they are in the moment, and so they can keep the students in the present moment, and there is real learning. So we have already embarked on that, but I can also see that maybe half of what has been done in training is probably not being implemented. So that's probably the catch that we need to resolve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kezang, for sharing your thoughts with us. I have just been reminded that we are over time now, so I would like to request the panelists to keep the answers short as well. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add on, before we move on to the next question? Okay. I think another thing that was highlighted by our panelists here today is that the idea of social and emotional learning is actually deeply rooted in Bhutanese culture. And while it looks like some schools have already started sort of touching upon it through meditation, I got to hear from Ms. Hearing about the work that she did in some schools. I would like to know, how can schools in Bhutan be more intentional about teaching these concepts in a fun and engaging manner? So how can we bring about SEL education that is apparently deeply rooted in the Bhutanese culture to schools, but when we do that, how can we be more intentional about it, and how can we make it fun and engaging? Yes, Dr. Sencho, would you like to go?
Yeah, I was just quoting the other day, one of our counselors, Madam Sunam Pelden, now she's in Australia, in Perth. She's done her PhD thesis on suicide prevention among school children in Bhutan. And one of our corollary findings was the children were repeatedly telling her Why can't the teachers give us 1 hour every day in the class for us to talk about ourselves, to talk with each other, to talk to the madam and the teacher, to ask a few questions that actually pertains to our day-to-day life? Why can't they give us this 1 hour? Why should it be 7 periods and not learning about ourselves, but about other things in life? And I think it should begin from there. I think if we can devote 1 hour for the children to talk about themselves, to ask the teachers about things that they want to know in their lives, that's where you can begin. And it's not so difficult, I think.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Central. Yes, Dr. Dorjilo.
I think the change has to come from top. It has to come from the government. It has to come from the ministry. It has to come from the system. I don't think any teacher in Bhutan is against social emotional learning. Not any teacher that I have met so far and have talked to. As I said, it's very stressful. And even in Sherapsi, that's a university. All my colleagues were stressed, unmotivated, and they were all asking me how to get to Australia if I had any connections. And of course, I did help a few to go to Australia. But that's sad. And so I can imagine teachers in schools. I mean, I don't envy school teachers. I teach at the university. It's far easier. So what I believe is that there has to be an understanding. There has to be an appreciation of these. And I think, as other speakers have mentioned, we don't have to look at Harvard or Yale or Berkeley. Of course, we can take some things from there, but we have a time-tested 2,500-year-old education system that has not only been given through the monastic system, but also has been
Dr. Dorji, your voice is breaking again.
In the traditional video. So we need to take a look at our own systems. What do we have? The socialization, which I mentioned, the socializing process that my mother put me through, my grandfather put me through, and these have actually taken me this far. My engineering degree, I left engineering when in 2002. I left. I don't know. I'm not using any of the degrees I have studied so far. But what my mother told me, what my grandfather told me, what they taught me is what is now beginning to be the best education, which I am now trying to put it to my children, and of course to the Bhutanese youth wherever I am invited to. So the appreciation or the adoption has to come from above. I don't think we should expect the teachers because they are stressed out.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dorji. Ms. Turing, did you want to add anything? I see that your hand's up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, La. I just wanted to give a short add-on to what Dr. Doji already said, La. And even in his presentation that time, he talked about giving trust and being resourceful. So I think the idea is that we do best when we work with what we have, La. Not when we're given something in whatever situation and say, do it this way or do it that way. That is when, in my experience for the teachers, it starts to feel like, oh, great, you're putting one more thing on my plate now. But they might, as we're talking about Bhutanese values, especially I've seen this in rural areas, they may already be practicing well-being. When we come in with our well-being program, we're just giving them the technical words to be able to use to identify the behaviors that they're already engaging in. For example, if there is a death in the community, and especially teachers when they get, I found that when teachers get posted to really rural areas, sometimes they become the de facto leaders of those communities. And if there's like, a death in a student's family, the teacher can naturally take the lead to help the community gather to help that family in need in their time of loss. That's SEL skills in action. And we don't have to tell them that they're doing that, because they're just practicing the Bhutanese values of empathy and community. So I feel that when we get too, rigid around our expectations and assumptions, we can demotivate the people who may already be engaging in such practices. So to be able to give trust to the teachers who are implementing and trying to live these values for themselves, and to meet them where they are, understanding that they already have so much on their plates, I feel like even starting with that approach can go a long way. I'll just stop there because we're done.
Thank you, Ms. Tiering. That actually brings me to my next question. Dr. Adrian, are you here?
Yeah.
In your presentation, you sort of spoke about deploying mobile units to the pole, and I think that caught my attention because when I was sort of thinking about SEL, one of the questions that I had was, how can we ensure that students in urban and rural areas have equal access to resources that they need to learn about ESL law? So could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think the point is that the further you are out from the center, two things happen. One is perceived control and conformity is higher. There's a need for conformity to understand what's happening out there. But at the same time, on the other hand, innovation and creativity also occurs more in the fringes. If you want to find out what's being done innovatively, you got to go out there. So in order to understand this creature called education as a system, you need to deploy your feelers. And the feelers, I think when I look at what His Majesty has done with his mobile medical unit, that's exactly the same thing. You bring a resource that is needed to the most rural places, but at the same time, you're also deploying the unit to talk to people, to have feedback, and to even learn and document things that are worth cross-fertilizing to other places. So nothing new there. It's just that in order to do this well, you need to be able or willing to redefine education, that it is not just what happens in the school, but it's also what happens in the fringes and how can we learn better from each other.
Thank you, Dr. Adrian. I think I would now like to ask Ms. Natalia or Ms. Youngdonla if there's anything that they would like to add. I think they're the only panelists that are yet to speak in the Q&A segment. So it can, and it doesn't have to answer the questions. It can be a closing remark. Yes, hello.
Hello. Hello. Yes, I wanted to just bring up one point. This is in general, like the question of how to make something fun for the kids, right? Not only just SEL, but in like any topic that you want to introduce to the kids, like how do you make it fun? And I think this is quite funny, but this is like, like the cool hippie, like hip mom trying to go to a party with their teenage kids. So I feel like it's a bunch of parents like trying to be hip and cool and join TikTok and go to party with kids. I think when it comes to making it fun, just give the responsibility to the kids. No one taught us how to use TikTok on Instagram. The kids kind of took it upon themselves to use it and learn it and make it fun and exciting. And so maybe have like a general umbrella. So it could be like, so example, if there is an art competition, just be like the art competition is going to be about how to improve education, and just kind of give the topic out to the kids and see what they come up with, because kids have so many different ideas. They make it fun. I remember this one particular incident when I was in grade 7. And when I was in grade 6 and going to 7, that was the worst year of my life, because the 2 years that I was in 7 and 8, the education ministry decided to make history in Dzongkha. Now, first of all, history in itself is a difficult subject, and Dzongkha for me is so difficult to digest because in complicated terms. So now there is history and history in the Dzongkha language for 2 years that I was in 7 and 8, and I failed that class. Now, which is really sad, because Now, recently, what Dinka is doing is on her Instagram, she has been posting a lot about Bhutan quiz, and she's posting on Instagram about who was the first, when was the first Zongbut, and that is so fun. Like, I've been participating, I'm learning so much from that, like, Instagram quiz than I have learned in the entire 2 years that I took history. So when it comes to making it fun, I think just give the power, again, giving the power back to the kids, and for them to decide on their own, like how to make it fun, how to, I guess there could be a sort of tool or guidance from the adults of what kind of conversations in what way can be guided. But when it comes to making it fun, making their own and kind of like taking ownership, I think we should definitely give that to the kids. And so just wanted to add that, La. Thank you so much.
I couldn't agree more, La. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Talia.
Just to make my point, okay, I will make a video. Yes, sorry, I changed the room. I'm now in the kitchen because it's kind of going close to dinner. So sorry, kind of whatever. Okay, just a second. Okay, so basically what I want to make very strongly, we are suddenly returning back just to, oh, sorry, it's my oven. We'll move to not to disrupt sound. So basically we are focusing only on social emotional learning, and it's fully correct and right, but we are forgetting what I was trying to bring. We are in crisis, anxiety of children, and then what we are going to provide to them, how we will adjust teachers, how we will explain how to deal with this new reality that children are getting back. They are not children as before. We need to give much more broader and much more deep counseling, I would say, not just social emotional learning. We just whole thinking that now everybody will be facing related to social emotional learning. We're having children in crisis, which is totally normal, and the system should adjust. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Natalia. Thank you once again for reminding us that the system has to adjust to sort of cope up with the new normal law. Mr. Kezang, yes, I see that your hand has been up for a while.
Thank you, Kiso. Just a quick point on the mobile units, and I was trying to get across on this earlier as well. I think given if we can use the technologies, the new technologies correctly, taking into account, I mean, technology is also the evil in the sense of distractions to our school students. We can actually deliver social and emotional learning virtually, not just mobile. I think, I mean, Dr. Adrian's point in terms of
Mr. Kezang, we can't hear you anymore, though. Are you still with us?
mobility is to make more call that came in. Sorry, I got disconnected. I think Kiso, right?
Yeah, we lost you.
Yes, Lo.
Yeah, so I was just saying, perhaps even virtual, deliveries in the sense of how, say, a sun salutation that can be done over live. I mean, there are many teachers who are doing that now in the COVID situation. We are getting this virtual event in our homes. We're getting vegetables delivered to us in our red zone areas, and I think these are good examples of how we could deliver social and emotional learning skills to students across the country. Of course, we need to jack up the infrastructure in terms of telecom connectivity, internet connectivity, and other related tools. So I just wanted to leave that thought here, La. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Tiringo.
Thank you, Kitso. I just wanted to share a little bit based on what Ms. Natalia shared about anxiety and some of these difficult emotions that children face in schools. Now, in an ideal world, like every school, every teacher, I personally believe should be a trained counselor. But in the absence of that, while we are currently in the pandemic, what is the best that we can do? Dr. Doji that time in his presentation talked about Bhutanizing the SEL programs and well-being programs. So what we are currently testing out, for example, right now, is that we take the Bhutanese cultural value of empathy and compassion, and we flip it to how can it be applied in your classroom. So empathy and compassion, one way to use it is to practice deep listening in your class. If a child comes to you with a problem and they trust you to share that openly with you, how do you deal with that? Too many times, like the burnt out teacher, the frustrated teacher can sometimes not know how to best deal with such situations. So we say, hey, maybe you can use some empathy and compassion. And one way to do it is by just trying to listen and hear what the child is saying without feeling the pressure to be task oriented, to try to fix the child or to fix the problem, but letting that child know that you are creating the space for them to hear them, that you understand what they're going through. Even that can go a long way, La. And you know, it's not perfect, but we got to start from somewhere. So I do believe that while you know, teachers who do these programs, when it's offered to them, you may not necessarily be a trained counselor, but you can do a little bit at least, and in that you can create a better self-esteem and allow the child to feel that they are cared for, that they are loved and held. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turing. Is there any questions from the audience? Like, I think we have time to take 1 or 2 questions. If there are questions from the audience, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question to the panelist. Yes, Dr. Adrian.
Kito,
Law.
if I may respond to one question which was there, but there was interruptions in my internet and I lost the question. But what I understand was a teacher probably was asking, how do you assess, analyze children
Doctor, just hold on a second.
after you teach?
I remind you to please please mute yourself if you're not talking. Sorry, doctor. Please continue.
All right. So the question was, how do you analyze children at the end of the year, whatever, after you teach SEL and all that we are discussing today? And the answer is very simple. We have to teach the children in a practical way. Basically, they have to learn the skills. So there are many methods of, teaching by learning skills, and I think teachers are quite good at that. I don't have to go into these details. We can break, because SEL is just not one subject. There are so many subjects. I'm talking of the 5 elements, and each element has so many components again. So we have to break each of the skills into smaller portions. And at the end of the year, we just have to sit down with the child and just throw him a question. All right, how would you do if you're given this issue or this problem or that issue? So creative, so interesting. You don't have to sit down in a classroom and write all the things there. You can just sit down with the child and talk for 10 minutes. I think that's how you can assess. So I think if you really want to do it, then
I think we have lost Dr. Sencho, but I think he got his point across. Yes, Dr. Adrian.
Yeah, actually, I was just trying to answer the same question. I'll just add on to Dr. Chencho by saying that the question of evaluation is a core skill in every teacher and every educator. If you do not know how to sense and quantify what is the progression in each learner, then how are we actually teaching and adjusting our lesson? So there perhaps is a reliance on metrics and rubrics. Those are what I call crutches, to help when we start off as educators to find out progression. But as you become an expert in the profession, you find that it's time for you to create your own rubrics and your own metrics. And you'll find that the rubrics and metrics become customized to each type of learner. And the higher you go, the greater the expertise you have, the more sets of rubrics you have for different types of people that you encounter. So that's a progression in expertise. It's not something that can be taught. Not something that can be enforced, because when you give so many sets of rubrics, it actually becomes confusing to the educator, like which one do I use now? So I think to go back to the point of how to, what kind of assessment tools, I hear you that it may initially sound confusing, but hey, a core skill of any educator is the ability to track what is the change over time. And not only change over time as currently indicated by behaviors, but the anticipated change over time after the person have left school. And that's something that is an important skill I feel educators must have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adrian. I think we have a question from Mr. Bishnula.
Can I? Hello.
Hi. Yes, Lo.
I just wanted to ask a question too, but it's okay. Who was going to ask?
Mr. Bishnu was going to ask his question. Is it okay if you go after him, Lo?
Yeah, I can wait. No worries.
Okay, Les. I'd like to request you to keep your question under a minute, Lo. Sorry. Yes, Dr. Vishnu. To you, Lo. Mr. Vishnu.
Thank you, Kitso, for giving this chance. Very inspiring talks on socio-emotional learning. Well, many speakers reinforced on the what part. The how part didn't come so much. The real devil lies in how. We are talking about coverage scale, 170,000 plus children in the country, mass education, reach, remoteness. So I would have, of course, appreciated some very concrete how part from this. So that's my comment on socio-emotional learning. Having said that, there is a lot of resources, and I just shared a link earlier. Please read that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vishnu. Thank you for your feedback, though. Yes, Ms. Yandela, and we will end with Ms. Yandela last.
Ooh, that's a lot of pressure then. End it on a good note. No, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, the conversation today we had was really good because we talked about the past and the present and how we all came to it. But one of the most key aspects that we are forgetting, the most important key aspect that we're forgetting is the future. Because one thing we have to keep in mind is whatever education that we are giving to the current lot of the kids, in 15 or to 18 years, these are the ones who will be young adults. And to prepare a kid for a future after 20 years, like how do you prepare a kid? And for me, like I'm not married, I don't have a kid, but I ask this question to myself a lot, that if I were to have a kid, what kind of education will my child have that is going to prepare my child for the next 20 years or 30 years that I don't even know how it looks like? So I think one of the questions that maybe when we talk about education reformation is also like talk about what does the future look like? What kind of future are we preparing our kids to have? And what does that future look like? I don't think anybody knows, but just to kind of have the point just out there for everybody to like think about and food for thought. So I just want to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yandela. Yes, Dr. Dorji. Sorry, I lied. Dr. Dorji, yes, La. Oh, Dr. Dorji is stuck.
To quickly reply. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, La, we can hear you now.
Very quickly, just to respond to Sir Vishnu, that we have a full-fledged 300 pages of curriculum on how to deliver all this stuff. But of course, in no way I can say that in 10 minutes or explain that in 10 minutes. But just to say that we have, and as he's mentioned, yes, we can have all the grand vision, we can have all the philosophies, we can have all the good things, values, traditional values, but at the end, you need to devise tools and techniques, how to deliver them, how should teachers deliver them, how should teachers learn them. And yes, yeah, so just to say that we have figured that out.
Yes, thank you, Lai. And also, I think this is just the first of many conversations that will be happening. So today, V-TOB turned 10 months. They also concluded their first series of EduTALK. I think it is only appropriate to end by asking Mr. Sonam Norbu to deliver a closing statement. I'd like to thank all the esteemed panelists and all the participants for coming. I would now like to hand it over to Mr. Sonam Norbu.
Thank you so much. Dear all, as we come to the close of the week-long series of EduTalk Bhutan, it is an emotionally nostalgic moment to close. It is also very clear that this is just the beginning. I would like to thank all the panelists, moderators, participants, and viewers for the collective responsibility and solidarity shown for the cause of education. It is to gather forward. It was heartwarming to see the passion, responsibility, inspiration, and genuineness to the perspectives, suggestions, insights, and recommendations that came in. Over the course of these 7 panels, we have tried our best to discuss education. I am very much familiar that education is such a broad theme to be discussed within 7 panels. Everyone came together to look forward to a better education system. From purpose of education, technology in education, educational expectations, to curriculum, teacher education, transmission of cultural values and traditions, and social emotional learning. We have shared our variety. The whole series has been recorded in video and text. We will be presenting and submitting the report to Ministry of Education and other relevant offices. We will continue these discussions, for which we will invite every concerned citizens besides the experts and education stakeholders. We would be having teachers as well as students too. We also recognize that education is a deep and broad subject, but we promise to do our best. Thank you and Tash Delay. Have a good night.